right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the July 2024 meeting of the Oldham County Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm Greg King, Chair. If everybody would please join me in the pledge to kick off with. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, and if everyone would also please join me. Set your electronics to silent for the duration of the hearing. Thank you very much. First order of business will be approval of minutes from last month's hearing. Can I go ahead and get a motion on the floor? So moved. Mr. Elder, thank you very much. Any edits, corrections, or need a second? Let's have a second first. Mr. Finney, is that you? No? Ms. Jones, thank you. All right, Ms. Jones?
I just had a few minor questions.
Okay.
On page 3 of 10, under the second portion with the second bullet point, it says the proposed subdivision sits on a parcel of land of approximately. Should that say of which approximately? It just doesn't read very well.
What about which has approximately 92%?
Just it needs a couple more words in there, maybe.
Wait a minute, which, we'll
Of
fix
which
it.
approximately
Yeah.
92% is zoned.
All right.
Okay, and then on,
It's of which approximately 92% is zoned.
Yes,
Of
that
which.
sounds right, yes.
Of which, yep.
page 5 of 10. This is kind of like maybe the third paragraph. Director Urban asked what utilities are in the right-of-way that isn't described by a dimension here on your typical. Should that be,
Cross-section.
so that?
Yeah, it's when we were talking about what can fit within the right-of-way and then making sure that cars didn't hang over the driveway.
Okay, so typical is the right word there?
A typical cross-section.
Okay. Okay. And then one final thing, I think. This is just more of a curiosity question. On page 410, where it talks about the City of LaGrange does not permit on-street parking, is that everywhere in the City of LaGrange or just subdivisions?
Just subdivisions.
Okay. Does that need to
Obviously,
be?
on Main Street, which is in the city,
I know,
you can
that's what
park
I'm
on the
like,
street.
there's street parking, okay. I didn't know if that should be specified for if someone's reading this and, because it says, the City of LaGrange, which does not permit on-street parking, so there will be no on-street parking if that just needs to be specified in subdivisions.
Well, in the body of the minutes, it doesn't become an issue in terms of our decision, so.
Okay.
And I don't really know what the rule is, so rather than trying to fix it, if you're
Okay.
okay, we'll just leave it.
Okay, all right, that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Anyone else? All right. All in favor of approving as corrected, please signify by saying aye. And opposed, like sign. Minutes are approved. Okay, so Commissioners, first docket item that we're going to run through today is a matter of hearing protocol. The one that has withdrawn, according to your handouts here, is PZ24-010. So currently it is on the table and it needs to be removed from the table so that we can formally acknowledge its withdrawal. So can somebody please come up with a motion?
I'll make a
Remove
motion that we withdraw docket PZ-24-010. Project has been withdrawn by I assume, the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Do I have a second? Mr. Hampton, thank you. All right, discussion? All right, we'll go into a voice vote on this. All in favor of acknowledging withdrawal, please signify by saying aye. And opposed, like sign. And 24-010 is withdrawn. All right. Anything else? Okay, Ms. Edgar. Oh, let's go ahead and swear staff. Thank you.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and Miss Edgar, we have PZ-24-011 coming up, correct? Will you please read the docket?
Docket PZ-24-011, application has been filed by Cornell Property LLC for a zoning map amendment for a non-owner occupied short-term rental property and museum located at 109 South Walnut Street, LaGrange. The property is 0.222 acres and currently zoned R4 Residential District, and the proposed zoning is CN Commercial Neighborhood District.
Thank you, Miss Edgar. And Mr. Fisher, you'll have the staff's presentation.
Yes, Ryan Fisher, Senior Planner with Oldham County Planning and Development. So I do have this case, as well as you'll hear from me the rest of the morning. So this is for a zoning map amendment and corresponding development plan that we also always vote on with the zoning map amendment for a property at 109 South Walnut Avenue. So this is the property in question. And so this application has been filed by Cornell Property LLC for a zoning map amendment for a non-owner occupied short-term rental property. And there'll be a corresponding museum as well located at 109 South Walnut Street. I'll let the applicant give you a little bit of the history of the building and why they're wanting to do that. The property sits on 0.22 acres, 222 acres of land and currently zoned R4. They're asking for that zoning change to go to commercial neighborhood district. You all heard maybe a year ago a property across the street that went to commercial neighborhood as well. So a little similar to that, but we'll touch on this. There's some moving parts in this, so I'll try to make everything as clear as we can for you. So once again, this is in an existing R4 residential parcel of land asking to go to that CN commercial neighborhood right here in downtown LaGrange. No previous site history. They did have building permits. I didn't put this in here just because sometimes it's not really that important, but and I'll allude to this when I talk about kind of how this case got originated, but the applicants completely remodeled this house. And so all the permits and things were pulled for that remodel. And then once they decided they were going to rent it as a short-term rental, they were advised that they could not do that and that they needed to come to the county and talk to us about that. So while we have no previous planning history regarding it, they did have building permits, pulled all the necessary electrical permits and all that. As far as this case history goes, I met with the applicants several times. So when LaGrange Code Enforcement sent them to us, the applicants came in, talked about what they needed to do. At the time, in last fall, our short-term rental regulations had changed, and I know you all don't normally hear these cases, our Board of Adjustments does, but our short-term rental regulations had changed to not allow any more non-owner occupieds unless they're in commercial or office zoning areas. So with that being said, as we were going through this, we said, well, you can go, it's got to be your primary residence. We went through different options for them. After a considerable amount of time, I mean, this is probably when I first met with them, probably 5 months ago, maybe. It was decided that they were going to go through the zoning change. That way, it wouldn't allow them to have to move into it. It wouldn't allow, wouldn't require them to have to go and get the conditional use permit. We thought, and we'll get to that in a second. So you can just kind of see that this has been going on for a while. So they did have a neighborhood meeting in early June, and then they formally applied to come here. We posted that to our website at the end of June, sent out adjoining property owner notifications, posted in the Oldham era, and then we did post a sign on the property on the 9th of July in accordance with law. So once again, a couple more pictures of the area here at Washington and Walnut. If you all are familiar with this house, just not too far from here. And these are a couple pictures just showing basically the sign posting on the property, but also gives you a pretty decent idea of what the house looks like. So here is the corner of East Washington and Walnut where the property resides. And our zoning map showing it's in R4, but you can see quite a few mixes of different occupancies around there. There's some commercial zoning, the commercial neighborhood just across the street, which was one that came through here not too long ago. So several different mixes of zoning around the area. Our future land use map does show that this would be single-family city. So the applicant's proposing that zoning map amendment to change it from R4 to commercial neighborhood. The purpose of that commercial neighborhood district is to promote the reuse of structures located in urban areas of Oldham County that have been constructed for mixed commercial and residential use, may be currently or used or vacant, or which are located on street corners or on blocks with a significant number of retail businesses. So this does sit just outside of downtown LaGrange, actually maybe not even just outside, it is in downtown LaGrange. So you can kind of see that it does really fit within that commercial neighborhood district. So the proposed development will be used as a non-owner occupied short-term rental, as well as a small museum relating to the history of the property. And once again, I'll let the applicants touch on a lot of the history behind the property and what they intend to do with that. So now the little kind of veer off here we have. So the property resides within the city of LaGrange. Now in early January of this year, LaGrange adopted their own short-term rental regulations, which for the most part pretty much took ours and everything it said, with a few exceptions. And one of the exceptions when we were doing the staff report was that commercial neighborhood in the Oldham County regulations doesn't require you to have to go get a conditional use permit. It's a permitted use to be a non-owner occupied short-term rental. Within the city of LaGrange, that still requires a conditional use permit. So when we get to the binding elements, if you all do choose to approve, that we'll probably want to put a binding element in there that the applicant must go get a conditional use permit from the LaGrange Board of Adjustments. They should apply for and be issued a short-term rental permit. I didn't put that in there because I don't really know the wording that we're going to use based on what we hear today. So that property does sit within the city, which has their own short-term rental regulations. So if you all choose to approve the development plan today, recommend approval of the zoning change to the city, there'll still be some additional hoops that have to be jumped through for the applicant. And this is just showing the LaGrange ordinance. We have this exact same sheet in our ordinance, except for the difference there you can see in the highlighted yellow is that commercial neighborhood within LaGrange requires a conditional use permit in the commercial neighborhood. And then you can see down at the bottom, the non-owner occupied host may be eligible for conditional use only if the owner currently resides in Oldham County or within 25 miles of the property. So, which the applicants do, but just wanted to make a note of that they have that in their ordinance as well. And so proposed binding elements, the approval applies only to the plans presented at the July 23rd, 2024 Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing. Should be no changes to the plan without review to the Oldham County Planning Commission and Engineer's Office. And the plan must comply with all federal, state, and county ordinances and requirements, comply with all necessary easement restrictions at the time of construction plan approval, which there won't be any changes to this building. And then the other one that we'll probably want to add in is that they still have to go forth for a conditional use permit and short-term rental permit with the city of LaGrange. But other than that, the applicant's requesting that zoning change. So we'll have two motions that you'll have to make if you choose to do so. So the motion for the development plan and then the zoning map amendment would be a recommendation to the city of LaGrange. With that, I think that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. So nothing additional from staff? Thank you. All right, commissioners, questions of staff. Mr. Douglas, is that you?
Just remember to save some for the applicant.
This is more of a technical or, excuse me, a legal question for staff. Or basically, if we're making a recommendation to City of LaGrange for a zoning map amendment change, why would we put in the binding element that it's bond approval of City of LaGrange for conditional use? Why can't they just do it when they make the approval of the recommendation to change the zoning map amendment. It would be in their belly whack at that point, I would assume, to do both.
The only thing I could think of an answer for that would be, so the binding elements are approved with the development plan. The zoning map amendment is going to go to the city of LaGrange. They usually don't mess with the binding elements. And so that would then go with the development plan that they have to approve or apply for and be issued a conditional use permit prior to being able to get a short-term rental license with the city.
It's a little redundant,
Yeah.
but it keeps it clear. You can't have a short-term rental without a conditional use in the city, period.
Right.
So,
I mean, I assume it doesn't hurt one way or the other. It's just that I was wondering, they could put additional conditions on it
they can.
at the Board of Adjustments.
You know,
in
it's
the
just an
city.
understanding every step of the way.
Okay.
And I think the applicants actually really understand that,
Okay,
and you'll hear why they're going for a CN instead of a C1.
okay. I just,
C1 wouldn't require a conditional use,
right.
because it's allowed as if it were a hotel. So I'm assuming that you're going to explain why you're going for CN.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Questions of staff? Very well. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Oh,
Well-
Ms. Jones, I'm sorry.
First thing, my screen is not working here.
I can't help you with that one.
Okay, my other one is, so the changes here on this, those have already been completed, where it says because you said there won't be any changes to the property, existing lean-to to be removed, proposed addition to existing residence, that's all been completed, is that?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the building permits had already been finalized and everything is done, ready to go. They were pretty much ready to go when code enforcement said, you can't do that. So,
Okay.
All right. Anything else, commissioners? Yeah, we're going to work on this. We're good? Terrific. All right, additional questions or technical issues? Right? Okay, we'll move into presentation from applicant then.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Give me just a second to open up my file here. Good morning, Chair King, members of the commission. My name is Brooken Smith. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Swansburg and Smith, PLLC. Our office here in LaGrange is at 117 West Main Street, and I represent Cornell Property LLC with regard to its application for a zoning map amendment. And with me today are the owners of Cornell Property LLC, Marcia and Don Cornell, who are sitting here in the gallery. In a minute,
Will we be taking testimony from them?
yeah, I will.
Let's go ahead and get members of your team sworn, okay?
okay.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I will invite Marcia Cornell to come up in a minute to give the commission a little bit more detail and insight into the background and the vision and the history of this property, because it does have a unique historical footprint and story within LaGrange. But I'll just get right into it. I mean, as Mr. Fisher pointed out, what we're asking for is for the Oldham County Planning Commission to approve an amendment to the Oldham County zoning map for the parcel at 109 South Walnut Avenue from the current designation of R4 to CN. And this is a presentation that I've prepared for your all's benefit and the benefit of people who are watching this. And I would ask that this be made a part of the record that we're compiling today. What you see here is a bird's eye view. It's a little bit of a step back from the staff report, but you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, the green square is the subject property there on the corner of Washington and Walnut Avenue. So Kentucky state law sets the legal standard for approving or considering the request that we are making of the commission today. And specifically, KRS 100.2131A provides that before a map amendment is granted, the Planning Commission must find that the map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan, or in the absence of such a finding, that one or more of the following apply. And then there's a cite to sub A, that the existing zoning classification given to the property is inappropriate, and that the proposed zoning classification is appropriate. And what I'd like to just emphasize for the purpose of this standard is that there's actually two standards by which the commission can approve the map amendment that we are requesting. Either a finding that the amendment is in conformity with the comprehensive plan, or that the existing zoning classification is inappropriate and that the proposed zoning classification is appropriate. If either one, I would argue it would be appropriate to approve our map amendment. And the actual argument that we're making is that the proposed amendment satisfies both conditions, and so it can be approved on both standards for reasons that I'll go into right now. First, sort of taking the second standard first, the existing zone classification is inappropriate. Presently, 109 South Walnut Avenue is zoned as R4, which generally applies to high-density residences such as apartments and multifamily structures. This property was originally built in 1845 and has served as a single-family residence. And Ms. Cornell will go into a little bit more of the history of this in a minute. But in other words, the current R4 zoning designation does not adequately convey how the property was, is, or will be used. And this is another picture of the outside, the exterior of the building. A little bit different view from what the staff presented, but pretty much the same orientation. On the other side of the coin, the proposed zone classification is appropriate. A CN designation, which is what we respectfully seek for 109 South Walnut Avenue, generally applies to quote, promote the reuse of structures located in urban areas of Oldham County that have been constructed for mixed commercial and residential use, which may be currently underused or vacant, and which are located at street corners or on blocks with significant numbers of retail business uses. And that's a reference to Oldham County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance Section 140-010. And again, we'll go into a little bit more detail, but again, the plan here is to use this structure as a mixed use, as a short-term rental property on the one hand, and as a public museum that chronicles and preserves some of the unique history of this building that not only is a residence of Buddy Pepper, but was also a resident of one of the members of the armed forces who was on the USS Indianapolis, which was a battleship in World War II, which was sunk by the Japanese in the theater of that conflict. And it has preserved some of the memorabilia from that time period. So what I've just described is how the proposed amendment satisfies that second prong of KRS 100.213, that the current zoning classification is inappropriate and that the proposed zoning is appropriate. But I would also like to stress and emphasize that this proposal also adheres to the Oldham County Comprehensive Plan. And specifically, I want to draw your attention to two objectives within that plan. First, land use objective LU-2-1 sub 1 expressly identifies as a goal the, quote, encouragement of new mixed-use development in addition to existing mixed-use centers and planned unit developments, end quote. This proposal is designed to recognize a mixed-use property that combines a short-term rental property with a public museum, thereby satisfying that objective. Secondly, This proposal adheres to Land Use Objective LU-3-1, which provides that proposals should, quote, support existing business retention and growth compatible with adjacent land uses and the availability of community facilities and services, end quote. And this proposal will support that objective by supporting existing businesses in downtown LaGrange by providing an attractive spot for visitors to stay right off the Main Street corridor. So how's this property going to be used? And again, I'd like to invite Marcia Cornell to come up, but these next two slides, which I'll show very briefly before she addresses the commission, are photographs of the interior of the building. This is the part of the building that would be used for the short-term rental property. I think these pictures will convey that these two pictures are from the short-term rental property. I believe that they will convey that a considerable amount of thought and attention and investment have gone into producing an attractive venue for people who may desire to visit the LaGrange and Oldham County area. So I think this speaks well to the fact that the Cornells have invested in this property and desire to make this an attractive space for visitors. So with that, and before I conclude, I would like to invite Marcia Cornell to provide a little bit more of the history and the vision that she and her husband has for this property.
Thank you, Mr. Miss. Let's get your name and address for the record, please.
Yes. Good morning. I'm Marcia Cornell. I live at 1219 Weibel Road in Crestwood, which is about 8 miles from the property.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay. As we were renovating the house, we found a time capsule in the attic that contained memorabilia from Howard Strawn, who was one of the young Marines that were killed aboard the USS Indianapolis on July 30th, 1945, which the 79th anniversary is coming up in just a few days. In that time capsule, we found drawings of him that he drew as a young boy of planes bombing and stuff, because back then, when you were a young man, you just wanted to be part of the country and be part of what was happening. So he joined the Marine Corps, and the family never really talked about him because he was lost at sea. They all just hoped that one day he would walk back through those doors and say, "I'm home." But he never did. And Mr. Penn, who was the third generation who lived there, was his nephew who had not been born yet. And Mr. Penn told me I was in my late teens when someone came to the house and was talking to my mother about my uncle, Howard. And they said that he had talked about him dying then, but it hurt so bad that they couldn't even speak his name. So he was almost 18 years old, Mr. Penn, when he found out that he actually had an uncle who died aboard the USS Indianapolis. And it was just heart-wrenching to me. So there were 1,195 crew members aboard that vessel that actually, it was a top secret mission to deliver the components to the atom bomb, titanium. They dropped all those components, and they turned back around, and a Japanese submarine sunk the ship, and 300 men died instantly, and 890 faced exposure, dehydration, saltwater poisoning, and shark attacks for 4 days before anyone ever knew that they were in the water. We never found out how Howard died, but if you ever when I first heard about it, I never learned about this Indianapolis until I found this information in the house. So I did a lot of research, and I said, in school I never heard about the USS Indianapolis. And my husband said, we watched Jaws, and there was someone who mentioned the USS Indianapolis in there and how the sharks were eating the boys and how he had gotten bit and all that. And Don said that was the first time that I ever heard that. And to me, I remember seeing that in the movie, but I thought it was a Hollywood thing, that it was just fake, but it was real. And 316 survived out of the 1,195. There's one survivor still alive. He lives in California. The Legacy Committee has been up here, and they're very excited about sharing this information that we found out. Everybody thinks that house was all about Buddy. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm not used to talking in a microphone. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. So everybody knows this house as the Buddy Pepper house. Buddy Pepper was born in that house in 1929. He only lived there just for a few years. I think it was 9 or 10 when he moved, but he was a piano prodigy. But I think there's more to that house and history, and we're right in the middle of the historic district of LaGrange, and I just think when you have history to share, gosh, it's a good time. We have the very front room was the only one that we kept with the original floors, the original baseboard, the original doors to the house, and also the original Civil War locks they were all original. My husband took them off and used a wire wheel, and they look beautiful. So that front room we were going to use as a museum. I have his medals, and I have the telegrams that were sent when they were trying to figure out where their son was. And gosh, they even have the last one where they said, "I'm sorry," and you can tell because they ripped it open real fast thinking, "We found my son," but what they found out was that he was lost at sea. So anyway, that's what we want to do with that. And we have his medals, and the Legacy Committee has given me books that the survivors wrote about the horrific things that they went through while they were waiting for someone to finally come and rescue them. So. Oh, and the short-term rental, we're able to, in the front room, we have a door there that we'll lock, and the short-term rental, we designed the house so that it was comfortable and so that you found peace in that house. And we wanted people to be able to enjoy that. And when they're there, if they wanted me to open that front room for them, it would be okay. And we will eventually, I haven't got all the details to it yet, but we have to figure out how, if this is approved, how we can open up to the community maybe a couple of times a month, and by appointment if people wanted groups to come in, and I could, myself or Abigail Harrelson, who wrote the book Buddy at the Piano, or Pepper at the Piano, so she knows a lot about Pepper. So that's it, I think.
All right, very well, thank you. Mr. Smith, anything additional for your presentation?
Just a couple final remarks, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate that. I think what you probably got is a flavor of how the building is really sort of a unique intersection between both sort of pop culture through Buddy Pepper and also the historical, the wartime historical contributions that LaGrange has made to our nation. Just a couple final points for the Commission's consideration, and just by way of reemphasis, if the zoning map amendment is approved, Cornell will be permitted to rent out this property as a non-owner occupied host short-term rental property under the new short-term rental property regulation. And just to answer a question I think that Mr. Urban had alluded to earlier, the reason that Cornell is requesting a CN as opposed to a C1 is simply because a C1 does not permit even the possibility of an owner-occupied use, but a CN does. So at some point down the line, the Cornells would have the ability, if they so chose, to occupy the premises under a CN. In addition to the reasons previously stated, this, and I think as Mr. Fisher pointed out, this proposal is the result of collaboration between Cornell and the planning and zoning staff to achieve this goal. And this proposal has many similarities to the request to amend the Oldham County zoning map from R4 to CN approved by this body for the property located at 107 East Washington Street, which is literally a block away. And that was done last April as part of docket PZ-23-009 for this body's reference. So in summation, Cornell Property is respectfully asking the Planning Commission to approve the amendment to the zoning map to designate the parcel located at 109 South Walnut Avenue as a CN from the current designation of R4, consistent with the law because it both satisfies the comprehensive plan and because the current zoning designation is inappropriate and the proposed use is consistent with the requested redesignation as a CN. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will conclude my remarks and I'll wait for the appropriate time to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Many thanks, sir. Is there anyone else here present wishing to speak in favor of this application? Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, we'll move into presentation, testimony from those opposed. Questions from those opposed? Anyone opposed to the application have testimony or questions? Very well. All right, commissioners, we'll move into questions from the commission. Who has questions of the applicant? Seems there are none. All right. Mr. Smith. You'll have no rebuttal and no questions from the commission, so we're going to ask you for your final statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your attention today, members of the commission. I won't belabor the point. I hope that the passion for this project has come through by Marcia Cornell and the really unique contribution that this property can make to this community. And again, I won't belabor everything that I've said. I just would point out again that because we're talking about this being a mixed-use property, both short-term rental on the one hand and a public museum, that conforms to the two objectives of the Oldham County Comprehensive Plan, LU-2-1, sub 1, and LU, I think it's and LU 3-1. So because it satisfies both the utilization of mixed use and supporting existing businesses, we urge the commission to approve this application as in conformity with the comprehensive plan, and also because the current zone of R4 is inappropriate to the use, and that the redesignation as CN would be appropriate for the intended use. So we hope that the commission will view our application favorably.
Thank you
very
Mr.
much.
Smith. All right, commissioners, let's hear from Mr. Urban.
Well, you have two decisions to make. The first is on the zoning map amendment, which is a recommendation to the city of LaGrange because it's within the city of LaGrange and they're a member of the joint planning unit. So that's the first thing to consider. As always, they're on page 3 in your staff report. There are recommended motions for either approval or denial. You can certainly rely on the evidence and testimony that was presented today, and that there's a justification statement in your packet from the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Mr. Baxter, anything to add?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
All right, commissioners, so floor is open at this time. First item up for consideration is the zoning map amendment. This is a recommendation to the city of LaGrange. Mr. Falvey.
Yes, I'd like to make the motion for approval to the city of LaGrange on PZ 24-011. It complies with the objectives of KRS 100.21 and in the LU 2-1 and LU 3-1 of the comprehensive plan. The existing zoning classification given to the property seems to be inappropriate, and proposed zoning is appropriate. The neighborhood has changed. There's C zoning across the street, and I think it'd make a nice addition to the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Falvey. Mr. Baxter?
Adequate motion, Mr. Chairman?
I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Second. Mr. Elder, thank you. Discussion? All right, we will move into roll call vote. Ms. Edgar?
Ms. Davis? Yes. Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Elder?
Yes.
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Ms. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. Finney, sorry.
Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hampton?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Winters?
Yes.
Mr. Klingenfuss?
Yes.
Ms. Nasser?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Edgar. And recommendation for approval of the zoning map amendment has been approved on a vote of 12-0.
The next item for your consideration is a preliminary development plan, and as you saw from the photographs and the overhead from our GIS, basically it is the existing property as it sits today. And that is not a recommendation to the city. We do that on our own. There are three potential binding elements. The first is that the approval applies only to the plan presented at the July 23rd, 2024 Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing. The second, there shall be no changes to the plan without review by the Oldham County Planning Commission and the engineer's office. And the third is that the plan must comply with all established federal, state, and county ordinances and requirements and comply with all necessary easements restrictions at the time of construction plan approval. And of course, there's no construction plan being submitted. So those were the only potential binding elements that I heard.
Very well. All right.
I don't see a fourth one. I'm not sure where you.
I thought you were going to do one for.
The conditional use.
Well, we can. I think it's redundant because they can't operate it as a short-term rental without that permit.
All right. Commissioners, the floor is now open regarding development plan. Mr. Falvey?
Sure, I'll make the motion to approve the preliminary plan. It does comply with the objectives of the comprehensive plan, LU 2-1, LU 3-1. And I would, I'm sorry, add the proposed binding elements as added by Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Falvey. Mr. Baxter?
Mr. Chairman, we have an adequate motion. Mr. Smith, you approve of those binding elements? You don't have any issue with those, I assume?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. All right, guys, we have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Second. Ms. Jones, thank you.
I got something real quick. You know, in order to satisfy that question, real simply, in number 3, we can add where it says establish federal, state, county, and city ordinances. If we put in city, that covers that it's required to have a conditional use.
Mr. Falvey is the maker of the motion.
I agree.
Okay. And Ms. Jones, as the second, thank you. We have both of those acknowledged and agreed to. Mr. Smith? We would agree to that modification. Thank you. Seems everyone's in agreement. Discussion? Mr. Douglas?
Now that we put that in number 3, I guess, or wherever we put it. So the city's LaGrange code enforcement would be the one to enforce or to review that the building meets code for short-term rental.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's specifically added is city of LaGrange, not just city, because it's within the city limits.
Okay. Mr. Douglas at all? Anyone else? All right, Ms. Edgar, we'll move into a roll call vote.
Mr. Finney? Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Ms. Davis? Yes. Mr. Elder?
Yes.
Mr. Hampton?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Ms. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. Winters?
Yes.
Ms. Nasser?
Yes.
Mr. Klingenfuss?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Edgar. And the motion on the preliminary plan approval is passed on a vote of 12 to 0. All right. Everybody good? Commissioners good? Okay, moving into next docketed item. And Ms. Edgar, would you be so good to read the docket for us?
Docket PZ 24-012. Application has been filed by Glenview Partners Acquisitions, LLC, for a development plan review for a proposed warehouse distribution center complex located along the Commerce Parkway Extension, Buckner. The property is 59.98 acres in zoned IPD Industrial Park District and I-2 Heavy Industrial District.
Thank you, Ms. Edgar. And Mr. Fisher, you again.
All right, it's me again.
Right.
Ryan Fisher, Senior Planner with Oldham County Planning. So this is for a development plan, site plan review for this property in the area of 393 Commerce Parkway Extension going up to Mattingly Court area in Buckner. So this application has been filed for a proposed warehouse distribution center complex, three different warehouses on that location. The property is on 59.98 acres, and it is zoned IPD, which is our industrial park district, as well as a portion of I-2 heavy industrial. So this is the location, the site information. It's currently undeveloped. And for some reason, I have a very short presentation for you today. I was going to go out and take pictures to make it a little bit longer, but they would have really done you no good because it was just some grass and trees. So I decided I wouldn't bore you with those. So once again, it does sit on 57.51 acres of property. No previous site history to note. As far as this history, we did have a pre-application meeting with the applicant back in May. We went to TRC in June. I've attached those meeting minutes to your staff packet as well in case you need to reference those at any point. And then as far as this case, we posted it to our website at the end of June, sent out our adjoining property owner notices on the 3rd of July, and the public notice appeared in the Oldham Era on the 11th. So here is the large property in question that encompasses really this general area here and here. This parcel is a little different because it does encompass so much here. You've got Tri-County Ford here, all the businesses on Mattingly Road, and then here is our map doesn't show it, but Commerce Parkway, if you've driven it lately, does not stop there. It keeps going through now. So that is the property that we're looking at. Here is the zoning, IPD, and then once again, it's got a little portion of I-2 there, but really you're looking at the entire IPD district where this proposed warehouse will go. So the applicant is proposing those multiple warehouse buildings on that 57.51 acres of land. The intent of the IPD is to create performance-based standards that will best utilize the community's limited industrial and commercial resources, resulting in the expansion of the community's economic base and enhancement of the community's quality of life. The IPD is intended to provide sufficient space and attractive landscape and planned industrial parks for industrial, commercial, and office activities, protect future economic development opportunities from incompatible land uses, ensure compatibility between industrial, commercial, and office operations within an industrial park, and provide employment opportunities for community residents, as well as reduce commuting times. I did include those IPD regulations within your staff packet as well at the tail end of the staff portion of that report for you to look at. It's got several standards as far as parking goes, landscaping, and all that stuff. Everything at this point, they do not have a tenant at this time, so everything that kind of meets the objectives of the IPD right now, they have met. And like I said, one of the binding elements is going to be a landscape and lighting plan will have to be approved. That's also covered under the IPD. So the thing about the IPD is all principally permitted uses in all of the commercial zoning districts as well as I-1 are permitted in the IPD. So you can have a whole host of range of activities. Anything commercial and the industrial one is allowed within that IPD. So the applicant is proposing 3 separate warehouses. They're known on your plans, if you see the plans, as Tract 1, Tract 2, and Tract 3. So that's a total of 729,445 square feet. And you can see the different tracks there and the sizes of those buildings as well as on your plans that were provided to you. Here is a look at those plans. I'm sure the applicant is going to provide you much more information on these buildings. That you've got those plans. And then one representation of the buildings that they provided is located here. It was also in your staff packet as well. And so proposed binding elements on this approval applies only to the plans presented at the July 23rd, 2024 Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing. That landscape and lighting plan must be submitted for approval at the time of construction plan approval. There should be no changes to that plan without review by the Oldham County Planning Commission and Engineer's Office, except for those landscape and lighting plans, which are reviewed at the staff level. And that plan must comply with all established federal, state, county ordinances and requirements and comply with those necessary easement restrictions. With that being said, that concludes my presentation, and I'm sure the applicant has a lot more that's going to fill in the gaps for me, but I'll entertain any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Mr. Silliman?
Oh, I forgot about him. Sorry.
How can you, right? Get your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, sir. Jim Silliman, County Engineer, 100 West Jefferson Street, LaGrange. You should have in your packet the Technical Review Committee comments. All those would apply from the Engineering Department. There are some detailed comments in there that I won't go over, but primarily as the County Engineer and Stormwater Coordinator, we're focusing on review of traffic and stormwater impacts. With regard to the stormwater, it is a large site. Obviously, it's greater than 1 acre of land disturbance, and as such, they'll be required to obtain a Kentucky Division of Water KYR 10 permit for the land disturbance, in addition to an Oldham County Stormwater Management and Erosion Control permit. With that permit, they'll provide construction plans to my office for review. We'll ensure that the design handles the stormwater in accordance with our current ordinance. They've shown several proposed detention basins to do just this. In addition, the discharge of the basins appears to go to the I-71 right-of-way, so they'll also be responsible for addressing KYTC's responsibility, which is the addition of another storm event, the 25-year storm event in that detention basin analysis. There's jurisdictional streams, mapped blue line streams. You can see them on the plan here. One primary going through here. As such, any impact or disturbance to those waters would require permitting from the Kentucky Division of Water as well as the Army Corps of Engineers. We've had preliminary coordination with the applicant's engineer on staged construction to potentially begin land disturbance outside of the areas that would impact those streams, and then as they acquire those permits, be released to start working closer to those. So they're very well aware of that requirement. We would also require before, during the completion of construction and before the release of erosion control bonds, we'll require that easements be provided around the detention basins and a stormwater maintenance agreement, and that'll be recorded with our county clerk. There's also a somewhat unique feature in that at this very southeast corner, there's a detention basin that was actually constructed as part of the Tri-County site. It's actually on this property. They're aware of it, and this plan actually shows a proposed wall to not disturb that area. With regard to traffic, the data that we fished from the Institute of Transportation Engineers manual agrees with data that their traffic engineer provided us, which is basically that the site generates over the 100 PM peak hour trips that would require a traffic impact study or a traffic assessment. However, there is another criteria that we look at, which is the volume on the road that it connects to, which is Commerce Parkway. And based on our observations as well as recent studies that were provided, particularly the Wawa site, Commerce Parkway does not have the 2,000 vehicles per day that would require that traffic impact study. So as such, we're not requiring a traffic impact study or traffic assessment for this project. So that's the extent of my comments.
All right, thank you, Mr. Silliman. All right, commissioners, questions for staff? Mr. Finney?
I have a question for Mr. Silliman. Even with the addition of Kroger there, the additional traffic does not...
Not at that location.
Not at that location?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, commissioners, anyone else with questions? Mr. Douglas?
Mr. Urban or Mr. Fisher probably can answer this. On your drawing, I guess the plot says IPD/I2. So is that in light industrial I2 in that area? And they're asking for IPD/light industrial I1? So what is that? I don't.
So you're probably alluding to where it's set I2. So there's a small portion on this parcel you can see here on this map that has I2 in it. So whenever I just let you know about the parcel identification, I let you know, but all of their stuff that they're going to be doing is within the IPD.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners, further questions? All right, seeing none,
Let me
Mr.
just,
Urban, go.
and if you look on your site plan, a big sheet, you can see that little dividing line between I2 and IPD, and really almost all of it, if not all of it, is in IPD.
All right, we're good? All right, we'll move into presentation from applicant. Mr. Ashburner,
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission.
go ahead and get your team sworn.
Yes,
Okay.
please. Eric.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
So, good morning, and thank you all very much for your time today. We have a team here to make sure we address your questions. But just as a preliminary matter, this is a development plan that really has been designed using your zoning ordinance as its principal source of design. So we're not asking for any variances. We're not asking for any waivers. The uses are allowed in the zoning ordinance. I do have with me Todd Blanton, who's with Glenview Partners. He's going to come up in just a moment and introduce himself, as well as Mike Hill and Eric Sen, who are here from Land Design and Development. Their firm worked with Todd to compose the plan that we're talking about today. So I will then go through a little bit of information about surrounding, kind of the surrounding environment, repeating a little bit of what Ryan just went through, and then we'll be happy to answer questions. So Todd, why don't you come on up?
Get your name and address for the record to begin with.
Yes, sir. Todd Blanton with Glenview Partners, 111 South Highland, Memphis, Tennessee, 38111.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. In short, Mr. Ashburner is going to hit on all the detail, but I met with Mr. Bazanis and Ms. Hamilton, probably 6 years ago when I was at another firm. I grew up in Louisville. I actually think that Louisville is one of the best logistics markets in the United States for a variety of reasons, and I've wanted to develop particularly this property, but more importantly in Oldham County for a number of years. As Mr. Ashburner mentioned, we think this site is kind of the premier site for Oldham County for our use, and we felt it complied with every ordinance associated with land use, and we were really just trying to work with economic development and work with the land use offices to make sure that we were a good corporate citizen and brought jobs to the community through our tenants and provided a nice Class A development for you. So Mr. Ashburner and Mr. Hill will provide more detail, and we're all happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Glenn?
Thanks, Todd. So initially, as I think Ryan alluded, you've got the subject property here. This property is zoned primarily IPD. There is a small portion that is zoned I2 already. And as Mr. Fisher mentioned, that area is really on this portion of the property. You can see as well what's surrounding the property. You've got Tri-County Ford, a variety of kind of smaller service and commercial uses that are on the west side. And then obviously you've got the ramp, and then Commerce Parkway is going to come right through here. This is the current zoning map. So you can see where there's the difference between the I2 and the IPD. As well, you've got C3 there for Tri-County Ford. Unfortunately, I converted this to a PDF when I sent it. And so this map, I just realized this morning, did not come through. It was really a Google map that was a redo of this, but I'll just mention, you've got Allied Pump, Thomas Industrial Services. There are, like I said, a variety of kind of smaller service, sort of more smaller scale industrial uses that are on Mattingly, and then obviously you've got Tri-County here. These are, again, some other names of some of the surrounding uses. So you've got construction uses, storage uses, and then obviously the car dealership uses and other logistics opportunities. This is what the proposed plan will look like in context when completely constructed. So you've got the larger building closer to the I-71 ramp and I-71. You've got the two smaller buildings here that will face Commerce Parkway. Importantly, within the IPD, there are some requirements about where you locate loading areas. Here, the loading areas are on the north side of the buildings, away from Commerce. On the larger building, they're on the sides. So along Commerce, you have standard passenger vehicle parking and kind of a more attractive view of the buildings, as well as a significant amount of landscaping. So with that, I'd like to ask Mike Hill to come up and talk a little bit about the plan in more detail.
Thanks, Cliff. Mike Hill, Land Design and Development, 503 Washburn Avenue, Louisville, 40222. So this site, as you all may know, was basically dissected when the new Commerce Parkway extension was constructed earlier this year. In total, on both sides of Commerce, it's about 56 acres. On the north side of Commerce, what's left is approximately 18 acres, which will be divided into two 9-acre parcels. Each would have an industrial zoned warehouse on them, about 136,000 square feet for each of those two buildings. Then on the south side of the new Commerce extension is a 36-acre parcel, approximately, and a warehouse, approximately 450,000 square feet proposed. So what we've designed is an area, or we've used the site to provide parking required for each of those sized buildings within each of the 3 tracks proposed. So we're meeting parking requirements in that respect for each lot. Landscaping shown is what is required by Land Development Code for Oldham County. So, of course, if approved, we will provide a much more detailed landscape plan that shows the exact numbers and species and locations of the required plantings. We are showing stormwater management. As Mr. Silliman alluded to, we've been working very closely with his office. We've had a lot of discussions with him up to this point, and we'll continue to do so as we move forward to design a series of detention basins and stormwater management system that captures the additional rooftops and pavement to meet the requirements of Oldham County's ordinance with regard to stormwater. We've also been working with all the other utility agencies, MSD and Oldham County Water and others, to ensure that we have adequate utilities leading to the site, and we'll be working with those agencies as we proceed with the site construction plans as well. It is interesting that this site is almost 100% surrounded by other industrially zoned properties, whether they're I2 or IPD, with the exception of Tri-County Ford, which is C3. And then, of course, we're adjacent to the interstate to the south. That's basically the summary of the site. Of course, we're here to help answer any questions that you might have at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Thanks, Mike. So one thing I just want to mention, of course, as I said at the very beginning, the proposed development really was designed using the comprehensive zoning ordinance as the guide. You all see lots of cases where a potential development comes in, it needs waivers, it needs variances. Here we have a development that is not only compliant with the comprehensive zoning ordinance, but is also compliant with the comprehensive plan. So this is the future land use map. In your staff report, it's noted that this is shown as commercial and industrial. That's the future land use map recommendation. In addition, here are some guidelines within the comprehensive plan that talk about new commercial and workplace in designated existing centers. That's exactly what we have here. We're surrounded by other commercial and industrial uses. This is exactly where you would put the kind of development that we're talking about today. And, further, the zoning ordinance, the comprehensive zoning ordinance really is, and it even states this in its statement of intent, is an expression of the comprehensive plan. So comprehensive plan says this is kind of how we want the community to develop, and then that intent is turned into the regulations that you all and obviously the staff, Jim and Ryan, enforce. So I did want to mention this is I call this a similar building design because this is a rendering of the type of construction that Glenview has employed in other areas. Obviously, the final design of the building will have to comply with the IPD and will be brought back to the staff to ensure that it does, along with the lighting plan, along with the landscape plan. With that, I think that it's a compliant building, it's a compliant development, and so we would ask that you accept the staff's recommendation and approve the site plan. As I said, we have Eric Sen and Mike Hill here to the extent that you have plan questions. Certainly they're available, and then if you have questions about Glenview, Todd Blanton is here as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ashburner. Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Of course, we'll need to get your name and address for the record and get you sworn in. Did you swear in earlier?
I did not swear in
Okay.
earlier. My name's David Bazanis, and our address is 204 South First Avenue here in LaGrange.
And you are with?
I am the president of Oldham Chamber and Economic Development.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Raise your right hand.
Yes,
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I appreciate the time to be here to speak in support of this project. As Mr. Blanton had mentioned, we had met with him several years ago as he was looking around Oldham County for some opportunities to bring business. And we're excited to see this project be presented as it has been today for 3 significantly sized industrial buildings. One of the opportunities or sectors that Oldham County has not been able to capitalize on very much has been in the industrial sectors. A lot of the reason for that is typically that Oldham County is kind of laid out for more of office type projects. But as you all know, the office environment is changing very rapidly and is a very dynamic setting. Commercial development relies on residential growth, but meanwhile, a lot of significant industrial projects have been landing in and around our region, specifically our neighbors in Shelby County and across in southern Indiana. And so what this project does is allows us to have an opportunity to have some inventory that makes us competitive when projects that come through the State Cabinet for Economic Development, through our regional partnerships with the I-71 Coalition, which are the corridor, the 5 counties that head up the I-71 corridor, and our partnership with Greater Louisville, Inc. in the Louisville area. We receive a lot of the leads that you see that get announced for other communities, and a lot of the barriers to our ability to compete for those projects is simply not having adequate inventory. I'd like to also comment on the investments that have gone up prior to this that have led to this project being here today. Years ago when Mr. Blanton visited us, the Commerce Parkway extension was only being discussed and planned. The widening of 71 was not certain, and also the 393 realignment and extension underneath the railroad tracks was not done. Those were really critical projects to be able to accommodate the type of users who will likely locate in these buildings. And so we believe that in addition to making a significant impact on the tax base through the property tax and the insurance premium tax, which is how the county collects on economic development, that also will have a significant economic impact in providing good jobs and continuing to incent the commercial development that's happening all around that corridor. So it's with that, I'm very excited to be here today and speak in support of this project. I'm happy to answer any questions if that's appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Brezanis. We'll come to that in a few. All right. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this application? All right, seeing none, we will move into presentation. Questions from those opposed to the application? Does anyone wish to speak or ask questions in opposition to the application? All right, seeing none, we'll move into questions from the commission. Commissioners, questions for the applicant? Mr. Falvey.
The developer, please.
Yes, sir.
Do you anticipate doing these buildings spec at one time and wait for tenants?
We will do them speculatively. We have it designed to be able to develop them all at once. I doubt that happens in its entirety. The northern the most northern buildings are replicas of one another, and so we would effectively be competing with ourselves. So we probably will hold off, both from a competition standpoint and from we need a nationwide permit for the northwest building, which will delay the project a little bit. So we will definitely hold off on that northwest building. It is likely that we will build the northeast building and the southern building at the same time. But yes, all will be speculative unless we get some interest very quickly here. So,
And do you anticipate them being multi-tenanted or single-tenant?
They are designed to be multi-tenant, specifically laid out. We have the capacity to be 4 tenants on each of the northern buildings, on each. I think it's likely that we'll be single tenant or 2 tenant on each of the northern buildings. On the southern building, it's really either single tenant or 2 tenant, based on how we've designed the auto parking. So,
have you had any interest to this date?
We have. So it's very preliminary, but we've had positive feedback from brokers who represent these kinds of users.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Falvey, anything additional? Okay, who else has questions? Mr. Hampton.
I know we don't, and you don't want to talk in hypotheticals, but just for me in my mind's eye, give me a couple of examples of who would be your perfect tenant.
Examples are
It doesn't have to be a name,
right?
But it could be what they do or what they. How it works.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The ideal user, or the likely user is what I should say, are either retailers that have some sort of consumer product. So it's basically just pure distribution moving in and out of the facility. Maybe there's some picking and packing of boxes inside of the facility, but no heavy industrial stamping, fabricating, anything along those lines. We want to stay away from those at, not at all costs, but as much as possible. Obviously, it would have to adhere to IPD anyways. So there's certain restrictions around that. So typically, it ends up being a retailer that is moving their supply chain, either a retailer or a consumer goods manufacturer, and they're just using this for distribution. Or it's a third-party logistics company like a UPS supply chain or a FedEx supply chain or a Ryder Logistics who has another location here. Someone like that who is doing the supply chain work for a consumer product manufacturer or a retailer. So there's an office component because they have to be able to receive the shipments and ship the shipments out. So there are a handful of office jobs typically. And then on the interior, it's mostly racking or floor stacked goods, and they pick and kind of reorganize the boxes for shipments out. So,
thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Hampton, anything else? Thank you. Mr. Douglas.
This could be for, I guess, whoever's going to do stormwater over there on, yeah. You might follow up with some of this.
Let's get your name and address for the record, please.
Erickson, Land Design Development, 503 Washburn Avenue, Louisville, 40222.
Sorry, Eric, I didn't see you back there.
No problem.
He was mentioning the northeast building that potentially could be built at the same time as the south larger building. What design or what will you use? Because I don't see any way to capture runoff to the Blue Line stream in between that I-71 trailer storage and the other IPD area. It looks like there's some type of catch basin in those general areas, but I do not see anything, and it looks like it slopes to that direction. And that's a lot of impervious surface.
Are you talking about this pipe here? Or are you talking
On the other side.
here?
Go.
Oh, over this side.
Yes. That.
Yeah, so all this will be diverted over to this stream over here, and the detention will be handled within these basins along this stream and down here along 71.
So the slope goes which direction?
The
contour. So you're going to change the...
Right. We'll be required to make sure that we're not increasing the peak runoff at either location. This, once we get down here to I-71 or to this location here where it goes underneath Commerce.
Okay. Because those are small streams.
Yes. And I believe right now there's a 54-inch culvert right here.
So we did speak with LD&D and Eric's team about they could direct the stormwater to this area and bring it across without detention on this side because they're still maintaining the stormwater on their site.
Okay.
As long as it is maintained on their site before it's released, then they're handling that detention in accordance with our ordinance. And that's what he was mentioning, the 54-inch pipe. We mentioned being able to, because you're adding this impervious surface, that pipe just needs to be able to convey the water to the other side.
And will anything be there to dissipate some of that detention or the waste off the runoff of diesel fuel, anything else coming off the parking lots? I mean, what are you going to do to capture? Because it's going to go into that detention basin on the other side, correct?
Right, but we'll provide water quality on our site prior to it going into that creek.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All you have, Mr. Douglas? All right, commissioners, further questions? Mr. Finney?
On this, and I really don't know who to direct this to, but on the plan, we've got approximately 60 acres, and to the east side, we've got about 6 acres that's not shown in this development. Is there any immediate plan for that 6 acres?
we are actually not acquiring that 6 acres along 393. That is not part of our plan, if you will. The plan terminates, I guess, if you will, at kind of the eastern boundary of what's shown up there. So it is going to be separately parceled out from the eastern portion, that little kind of keyhole along Highway 393.
So what's redlined here on our paper here is not exactly what's in your plan.
Correct. Those are carved out by our GIS coordinator. So I give him a parcel file, and he goes in and takes the entire parcel. So like he said, they'll parcel that out, apply for a minor plat or whatever to kind of create that parcel that they're purchasing. So it does not include that portion on 393.
Okay, thank you.
You really need to look at this development plan to see what they are purchasing.
Okay. Further questions, commissioners? All right, seeing none. Mr. Ashburner. Had no opposition testimony. We've got some questions from commissioners. If you care to rebut any of that, then you probably have open space to move into your final, okay?
Thank you all again very much. I think Eric and Todd did a very good job answering your questions, and I appreciate you all. You all always engage in a thorough examination of these applications. Again, this is a proposed development that is on land that has been designated in the future land use map as for commercial and industrial. It's zoned IPD, which is an appropriate zone, and the use being proposed is appropriate for the zone. And as I mentioned, I've now mentioned a couple times, the proposed design that is before you really was drawn in order to comply with the regulations that you all have taken the time to put in place that implement the comprehensive plan. So I don't think there's really much more to say. As I said, we agree with the staff's recommendation. I can say now, before I sit down, we agree with the binding elements that are included in the staff report. So I would ask for a favorable motion, and we're happy to take the binding elements as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ashburner. All right, Mr. Urban.
This is really simply development plan review and approval or consideration. Remember, it's not a zoning change. There are no waivers or variances. It complies with the comprehensive plan and the IPD zoning classification. So should you choose to approve it, there are 4 potential binding elements. The first is the approval applies only to the plan presented at the July 23rd, 2024 Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing. Second, a landscape and lighting plan must be submitted for approval at the time of construction plan approval. Third is there shall be no changes to the plan without review by the Oldham County Planning Commission and the engineer's office, except for landscape and lighting plans, which shall be reviewed by staff. And the fourth is the plan must comply with all established federal, state, and county ordinances and requirements and comply with all necessary easement restrictions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Urban. Okay, commissioners, before we move into motion making, any questions, any discussion? All right, seeing none, the floor will be open for motions. Ms. Davis.
I'm making a motion that we approve PC 24-12.
Microphone.
Let's get your mic up.
County Planning and Zoning Commission.
Will you begin again? Thank you.
Okay. I make the motion that we approve PC 24-12. The plans are consistent with the requirements of Oldham County zoning ordinance and specifically Section 230-110 site plan requirements. The approval is contingent upon the strict adherence of the binding elements and conditions of approval listed below that Mr. Urban has presented.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Mr. Baxter?
You have an adequate motion, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Mr. Hampton? Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, we're going to move into roll call vote. Ms. Edgar?
Mr. Elder?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Nasser?
Yes.
Mr. Klingenfuss?
Yes.
Mr. Winters?
Yes.
Mr. Finney?
Yes.
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Ms. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hampton?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Edgar. And PZ-24-012 is passed on a vote of 12-0. Thank you, folks. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break before we settle into the next docket item. Let's make it 10 minutes good enough? Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and we will now return to order. Ms. Edgar, can you please read the next docket?
Docket PZ 24-013. Application has been filed by Verizon Wireless in Horvath Communications for a uniformed application for cellular antenna tower with waivers to construct a 195-foot telecommunications tower and related ground facilities located at 4050 West Highway 524, Westport. Waivers requested are a reduction, excuse me, are a reduction in the landscaping buffer, in the minimum lease lot area.
Zoning ordinance section
34 Thank you.
340-0808. The property is 2.03 acres and zoned AG1 Agricultural Residential District and CO1 Conservation Residential District.
Thank you much, Ms. Nasser. All right, Mr. Fisher, you'll have staff's presentation.
Yes, Ryan Fisher,
that?
Senior Planner with Oldham County Planning. So as we stated, this is for a telecommunications tower and a landscape buffer and minimum lot area waivers. It's very similar to an application you heard back a few months ago on Highway 22. Same waivers that you all heard for that one and cell phone tower. I will ask for a little grace on this. This is in my 2 years here. This will be my first cell phone tower that I'm doing. And this staff report is set up a little bit differently than the ones that I'm used to doing as I took over from Brian's case, as well as the PowerPoint presentation is a little different. So just ask for a little grace on that. And I will note that on the first page of my staff report, that says PZ 23. So disregard that one as well. As I was going through this, I found all sorts of issues that I had. So as we said, this is for a telecommunications tower and waivers. As far as the notifications, the applicant notified their intent to file an application by sending certified letters to those adjoining property owners, posting a legal advertisement in the Oldham era, as well as posting a sign on the property. And then the planning office also provided notification of this public hearing by posting on our website at the end of June, sending out adjoining property owner notices on the 3rd of July, and that posting for this hearing was in the Oldham era on the 11th of July. So this is the parcel in question right at the corner of Vixen Lane and Highway 524, or Covington Ridge Road. It'll be this particular parcel right here on the corner. So the applicant is requesting approval to construct a telecommunications tower that would consist of a monopole telecommunications tower of 195 feet with a 4-foot lightning arrestor for a total height of 199 feet. This facility is intended to provide improved coverage for wireless communications in the area. Related ground equipment will be located on a concrete pad. And the leased lot area is 10,000 square feet for approximately 0.22 acres on the site. Here is an elevation of the tower. It does provide future antennas, 3 of them on that tower as well. Here is the premises, the leasee's premises, along with the 30-foot access and utility easement that will provide access to West Highway 524. And the overall site plan for the project, as you can see, the tower location, the related ground equipment, fencing around the location, and then the access and utility easement going out to 524 at the north side of that photo. Here's a few other documents. These were included in a large packet of material that were provided to you all. So this is the overall site plan with tower distances to nearby houses, as well as the overall site plan with pad distance to property lines. And then a more detailed site plan showing the location of the site. A 12-foot wide gravel driveway will be located within the 30-foot wide access easement, which will provide that access to West Highway 524. And once again, here is that drawing zoomed in a little bit for you to show. And a 6-foot tall wood perimeter fence with a 12-foot wide access gate will be installed to screen that facility at the ground level. And there was some elevation drawings for you to show you that fence. As far as the procedural process for this, similar to that case that we heard on Highway 22, that application was filed on June 10th. So a decision regarding this application must be made within 60 days for a telecommunications tower, and that's in accordance with that first paragraph, our Division 340 as well as KRS 100. And so a decision deadline for this application is August 10th. So if the Planning Commission does not either approve or deny the application by this date, the application is automatically approved unless the applicant has agreed in writing to extend the decision deadline. The Oldham County zoning ordinance also establishes certain development standards, and so these are the two that they're going to be asking for waivers from, item number 2 and number 8 in that Division 340. And once again, very similar to the case you heard on Highway 22. So the outside perimeter of the security fence surrounding the antenna tower shall be provided with a landscape buffer. The buffer is to be a minimum of 20 feet in width and contain a continuous evergreen screen that will achieve a minimum of 20 feet in height. And then number 8 is that any site to be purchased or leased for the installation of a telecommunications antenna tower or alternative telecommunication antenna tower structure, as well as ancillary facilities, shall comply with the minimum lot size requirements in the district to which the site is located. So that would be the acre minimum lot size. And so they obviously don't meet that with what they're asking for on the leasees area. So they're asking for waivers from both of those as well. And this was just a larger screenshot of that division with highlighting showing those two sections that they're asking for waivers from. So once again, the applicant's requesting those two waivers, one of the landscape buffer requirement and the other one of the minimum lot area. So in summary, so we're looking at really 3 motions: the telecommunications tower approval, as well as 2 waivers. And August 10th being the deadline that if a decision is not made today, that application is automatically approved. You also have suggested conditions of approval associated with the waivers in your staff packet, as well as binding elements with the associated telecommunications tower. So the conditions of approval associated with that landscape buffer waiver are that shall only apply to the application considered here today at the July 23rd, 2024 Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing. A wood plank privacy fence shall be incorporated into the perimeter fencing to screen the telecommunications facility at the ground level, and any perimeter trees shall not be removed. Suggested conditions of approval for the minimum lot area waiver would be that shall only apply to the application considered here today at the July 23rd, 2024 meeting. And then the third motion is the potential binding elements with the telecommunications tower approval, that there shall be no changes to the requested telecommunications plan and application as presented at this July 23rd meeting without review and approval of the commission. And the telecommunications tower shall comply with applicable local, state, and federal regulations. I believe that concludes my part. I'm not going to forget Mr. Silliman this time.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Mr. Silliman?
Yes, I'll be brief. I did perform a desktop review of this site, and it's obviously less than an acre of disturbance, so wouldn't require the stormwater permits that I frequently talk about. However, did want to check and see, and there were no blue line streams or jurisdictional waters that appeared to be within the immediate vicinity of the site. It is accessing from a state route, so they would be required to obtain a KYTC encroachment permit. Other than that, I have no comment.
Thank you, Mr. Silliman. All right, Commissioners, questions for staff? Mr. Finney?
Can we not approve this with, because of the size of the lot?
Well, that's your first decision is the minimum lot size waiver.
Right.
You know, it doesn't get approved if you don't approve that waiver, and we'll talk about that when we get there. And then the second is, a much simpler one is for a landscape buffer requirement. And then really, after you get through that, according to state statute, you either accept the cell tower or you tell them how it might be improved to be in better compliance with the comprehensive plan.
I mean, it's getting down to where we require an acre, and they're down here to where they're less than a quarter of an acre.
That's correct.
So it's kind of like, well, you're pushing down to where, okay, we'll put this on a postage stamp if we want to.
Well, you know, originally, and if you look around the county, originally, all of them were on much less than an acre.
Right.
If you remember, Mr. Carter, when he was our legal counsel as county attorney, he set us straight on the fact that the minimum lot size is 1 acre. And so it really isn't a density requirement like we would consider a subdivision. It's whether or not it's appropriate to have it on less than an acre and not be in compliance with our minimum lot size. And Mr. Bagster agrees with that.
And Mr. Urban, remind me, when we considered this one on 22, the lot size, I think the methodology, and I may be incorrect, but it was a 1 acre lot, and I think they worked it out that the ground not needed for the tower site was actually leased back to the landowner, or some way or another. We did something that, I mean, it was an acre on the other one.
It was, and somehow it was just reverted back to the owner because they were also, I believe, farming the land.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, Mr. Douglas, Mr. Finney, are you finished?
I'm not sure my question's answered, but yeah, my question's finished, but.
Well, again, it's a discretionary decision to determine whether or not they should lease 1 acre, even though they don't need it.
I'm going to stay in the same line of questioning. And I know it's been testimony by staff that this is equivalent. I'm not going to say, you didn't say equivalent, but similar to the one on Highway 22. I beg the difference. I mean, the one on Highway 22 set way off the main highway, back off, and this is setting right on Highway 524.
Well,
So-
I think he just meant by comparison, it's a similar case in that
The waiver,
it is a
the
cell
variance.
tower
Right.
with a landscape waiver.
So the question is to the staff, I know everyone keeps talking in the county about Highway 524. And if Highway 24 ever was widening anymore, what easements are left for them to take on that roadway? I mean, because there's always been discussions through this county about the issues with Highway 24 and the drainage issues and the roadway. So I'm not sure how bad that section is. I know you did it, Mr. Silliman did a desktop review of it. So, but I know he's familiar with the highway, and I know he's familiar with the stormwater runoff that goes through that area. So I guess my question is, if the state, my understanding is the state is supposed to be working with some project.
Not in this location.
Not in this location.
Yeah, and
Correct.
if you look in the packet that was provided by Horvath, there's a site survey, and that site survey identifies West Highway 524, Covington Ridge Road, as having a 60-foot public right-of-way by deed in this area. I know of no plans by the Transportation Cabinet to widen this segment of the roadway, and typically they widen it a little bit on each side if they were to take additional right-of-way. And in this location, I don't see that they're ever going to widen it other than for maybe stormwater or safety improvement. It's never going to be 2 lanes, more than 2 lanes, one in each direction. There's no purpose there. It's out in the countryside, and other than improving drainage, which they typically do in a 60-foot right-of-way, I understand what your question is. I don't foresee any time that that's necessary to take additional right-of-way.
Mr. Douglas, anything else? All right, commissioners, further questions? Mr. Finney?
If we are, okay, can the cell tower be built no matter whether we deny it on the basis of the acreage is too small or not?
I'm gonna look at our attorney for that answer.
Because we've had it in the past. Well, if they're going to build a cell tower, they're going to build a cell tower, no matter what, because we don't really have the prerogative of denying a cell tower. In other words, when what was the guy spoken here?
Dave Pike.
Yes, Mr. Pike spoken here.
We always started with, you can't deny us.
You can't deny it, correct. So if we can't deny it, we can't deny it. Well,
So again, your determination really is the less than 1 acre site appropriate or not, and grant a waiver or not? And then the landscaping requirements, and you need to hear evidence from the applicant in order to determine either of those at this point. So I'd suggest that before we continue a long-term discussion about it, let's go on to the applicant's presentation and get more information.
And certainly, Mr. Finney, I expect the applicant is going to address this concern in all likelihood. So, because when we talked about it the last time on the Highway 22, there was some discussion about the lot size and the proposal, and so I'm sure that information will be discussed as part of the applicant's presentation.
okay, thank you.
All right, commissioners, further questions? Seeing none, we will move into presentation from applicant. Go ahead and get your name and address for the record, please.
Absolutely. Russell Brown, I'm an attorney with the law firm of Clark Quinn, Moses, Scott & Grahn, 320 North Meridian Street, Suite 1100 in Indianapolis.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you. I was here in September of last year, I believe, talking about the very case that you guys are referencing on Highway 22. As a reminder, in that case, you did grant the waiver related to the lot size and denied our request for waiver related to landscaping. So I think that this case is probably dissimilar on the landscaping component. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But for on the lot size, I would say that a couple of things. First of all, as shown on the site plan, a telecommunications ground facility does not require much more than 10,000 square feet at a maximum usage requirement. Even to have ground equipment for 3 or 4 carriers does not require more than 10,000 square feet. So to go and lease extra space from a landowner for that purpose is really of no value to either the landowner or to the wireless communication provider. There's no use for it. It does not meet any functional need for this. Additionally, because there are not setback requirements related to the tower or related to the compound or those types of things, that would generally be another reason why you might have a larger lot, so that you could comply with setback requirements either to a lot line or to adjacent residential uses. Here, a couple points. One, this is on a 2-acre parcel. The adjacent parcel to the south is owned by the same landowner, by the lessor. So there's about 6 acres that are owned by the same landowner as this parcel. So you have about an 8-acre parcel. A majority of it is wooded. So one of the reasons we're asking for the landscape waiver is that we would be taking out existing trees to plant smaller trees. So we think that functionally First of all, it doesn't provide any additional screening, and it actually is, I think, bad public policy to take out existing trees to add smaller trees. As it relates to those kind of binding elements related to those requests, we would agree with those. But that's the reason for the request on the lot size. If it's a concern about adding, additional improvements between the boundaries of the lot area and the adjacent lot lines, I certainly think we could work through how to protect that or prevent that from happening, so we're not throwing up another accessory structure or something between the lot line, the lease area lot line, and this proposed property line. So it is the reason that we would request it is that it functionally it would not change the location of the tower improvement. If we had a larger area, we would still build it in the same location. So whether we lease 10,000 feet or lease an entire acre, the proposed location of the wireless communication facility would not change. So if you're looking at location-specific questions, that is not modified by complying with the ordinance. So that is the reason for the rationale. And we believe it is an appropriate waiver to grant when considering this tower. Happy to walk through just the tower generally, but I know that those are the first two kind of hurdles to overcome. This is an application of Horvath Towers. Horvath Communications. Horvath is a national tower builder, as was the case in previous applications here. Verizon is a proposed tenant at this location, but Horvath would be the leaseholder and would ultimately be the constructor of this tower. One correction in the staff presentation: this is proposed to be a lattice tower, not a monopole tower. So it is lattice design. Does not have any guide wires, but is proposed to be a lattice design and not a monopole as provided in the staff report. This location was chosen on this property for a couple of reasons. One is to utilize those existing stand of trees to try to shield ground equipment from adjacent properties. As mentioned, the property owner to the south is the same property owner here, but by retaining those trees to the east and west and to the south as well, we believe that provides some shielding of the ground equipment. Thus, the site is only visible from the drive along the highway along 524. As mentioned, this would utilize actually less than the 10,000 square feet of lease space. There is a 10,000 square foot of lease space. The compound is a 75 by 75 compound. It provides ground area for Verizon Wireless plus up to 2 additional co-locators. It is proposed to be surrounded with a 6-foot tall wood fence as provided in the staff report. Verizon would be the top tenant. They would be 190 feet would be their center line. As shown in the site plan, you have up to 3 additional antenna installations that would be permitted. At this height, we have an FAA determination that indicates it would not require to be lit, so there will be no tower lighting on this site as proposed. After completion of construction, it is a low traffic generator. You have essentially maintenance checks or when you have new equipment installed on the tower. So there's not a significant amount of construction on the site after the tower itself is approved and constructed. You do have an on-site diesel generator. Typically, it's diesel. Given that there are no nearby streams, that I would anticipate it would be a diesel generator. That's utilized in emergency situations only, when power fails in the nearby area, and that is tested on a monthly basis. This location specifically was chosen in the county to fill what is a pretty significant coverage gap, kind of as you move to the north towards the river, and also in the areas to the east. So in the coverage maps that are part of the uniform application, shows that there is a hole in this area of the community that is filled by this tower. It also provides a pretty good bridge of coverage to a tower that's located south here, as well as a tower kind of to the northwest that is in Indiana. So this provides coverage, meets coverage objectives. Often anymore, I'm talking about capacity. I'm talking about getting on and off the network faster when you're streaming or providing data services. But based on coverage maps, it appears here that there are significant coverage gaps, meaning you cannot make a call from many areas in this area of the community. As required by Kentucky Revised Statute 100-9865, the applicant has considered the likely impacts on nearby land uses and values and concluded that there is not a more suitable solution which can achieve the coverage and capacity objectives identified by Verizon Wireless for this area. That is our statutory obligation. We have an RF letter in the uniform application that provides that data. There are no co-location opportunities nearby. There are no tall structures upon which these antennas could be located. Thus, the reason we're here talking about a new tower. New towers obviously take longer. They take longer because they have to go negotiate with a landowner, have to come to you, seek your approval, have to go through the siting process, the federal and state approval process, and that generally is an 18 to 24 month process versus if there was an existing site, we could be operational in 6 to 12 months. And this is very reactive business in that we are reacting to customer needs and demands. When Verizon was looking for a location, the center of their need area was kind of near the corner of 18 Mile Creek and Rebel Ridge Road, so a little bit south and west of this site. But this site is approximately 0.6 of a mile, according to GIS, from that kind of dead center of the need location. So based on topography, based on the opportunity to have a willing landowner, this was the site that was chosen and presented to you today. Happy to talk a little bit about why needs exist. Briefly, the most recent data shows that 72% of Kentucky households are wireless only. That's up from 52% in 2016. So in 6 years, you went from 52% to 72%, which is a pretty dramatic change. And about 82% of kids under the age of 18 in the state live in a wireless-only household. So that is a big portion of the use requirements and the need requirements. Also, about 15%, according to Pew, about 15% of adults across the country have broadband or high-speed internet access only through their wireless device. And so that continues to be a reason for these types of towers and installations being built closer and closer or in the middle of residential or rural areas. And nationally, rural residents are most likely to have no wired broadband, so they are most likely to utilize their wireless device for that purpose. In many communities throughout both Indiana and Kentucky where I practice, we don't have in our comp plans areas laid out for public utilities or for necessary above ground public utilities. We don't lay out where our power lines are going to run. We don't lay out where you might have other utilities that are installed. From our perspective, wireless communications capacity is a public utility. It's not doesn't have the same advantage. I can't come in and say, "Thou shalt give me your property to allow me to put something there," but it is utilized in the same way that water and sewer and electricity are generally utilized in modern society. So your comp plan doesn't say this is where you should put wireless communication facilities, but they are a part of the orderly development of modern communities in our country. We believe that this property provides the best opportunity to enhance the current customer service needs and to provide for continued growth of the wireless needs in this part of Oldham County. We believe the uniform application is complete and stands ready for your approval today. With that, I'll be happy to sit down, but we request your approval of the two requested waivers and the uniform application as provided. And I'm happy to listen to those here to speak about it and then answer questions of the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
While he's up there, you know, I didn't hear a justification for your landscape waiver or a justification for your, which is what you've heard this discussion about. And you can also, there's an overhead there if you want to put up any exhibits. You haven't showed us any exhibits.
Well, I believe I would slightly disagree. I believe I did provide justification. The justification on the landscape waiver is that we would be taking down trees to add trees. I don't know that there's a clearer way to say that to add a 20-foot buffer surrounding this, I would have to take down 20 foot of existing trees. So I think that that is the rationale for the landscape buffer.
And what you are proposing is a...
We are proposing a 6-foot fence, wood fence, and that's one of the binding elements that we would agree to.
As opposed to a chain link fence.
As opposed to using chain link, correct.
Gotcha. That's what I was missing.
I apologize for that. And as it relates to the size of the area, I think from our perspective, requiring to have a larger lease area, which will be not utilized in any way, shape, or form, doesn't benefit the landowner. It doesn't benefit the community from our perspective, in that it just makes that unusable for that landowner. There would be no use for it from Horvath or from any other provider. It doesn't provide an advantage to the community in that it doesn't increase setbacks. It doesn't change the location of where this would be as it relates to surrounding properties or as it would relate to the right-of-way or any other setbacks. So if those are the objectives, I don't think they're accomplished by requiring a larger parcel at this location. Given that this is effectively 8 acres owned by the same landowner, having a smaller lease area does allow that landowner to continue to use and enjoy a larger portion of their own property that's not leased to someone else and therefore not available to their use. So we think that this actually, the smaller lot size allows for the continued use and enjoyment of the property by the lessor, and does allow for the continued kind of furtherance of the objectives of the zoning ordinance and the comp plan for this property.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Anyone wishing to speak in support of the application? Being none, we'll move on into next phase, testimony and question by those opposing the application. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? We'll go ahead and get you all to stand and get you sworn in. I will collect your names and addresses as you approach the podium. Please, everybody stand and swear in.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear? Raise your right hand.
I solemnly
Do you
swear.
do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Tell the whole truth, all the truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Name and address for the record, please.
David Burnett, 3715 West Highway 524.
Please proceed.
I received this in the mail, probably what you're all looking at now. That's why I'm here. I don't
Stay close to the microphone so we can pick you up on the record, okay?
Okay. I don't normally come here and speak in front of a bunch of people. Wasn't determined to do this, but when it comes down to this, all of our friends out there, a lot of them won't be here today. A lot of the older couples and stuff can't make it. And a lot of people couldn't take off from work today either. At 9 o'clock to come, I thought this was going to be at 9 o'clock this morning. We moved out here. 524 is a 12-mile loop. I know most of you know that. It's called as a scenic byway. And you don't know how many cars and motorcycles come out on the weekends driving that road. And what you were talking about earlier about widening that road, there's some things on 524 that just widen it a little bit. But if you all take a drive out there, go down to Knock on Wood or driving down to the to the park, it's a peaceful place, and it's all agricultural. And would y'all want to see that tower in your front yard? Open your door and look up and see a tower? You're talking about taking down trees, the canopy of trees. The trees are what, it's what hot. You're taking that and put smaller trees. It doesn't make any sense. But that 524, it really needs to be paved. You've got school buses that run on that road up and down that hill. And there's not much left of that road. They get off. I've driven the school bus, and it's dangerous. It needs to be fixed. I know they put the culverts down on that one hill, but be calling it a scenic byway, and then people will come out, and they're coming from all over. There's companies that come out here and drive. It's just a peaceful place, and a cell phone tower just doesn't need to be there. And all the neighbors have. A lot of them, like I said, can't be here today. And I don't normally do this, get in front of a bunch of people. I don't want to make a neighbor mad. I just don't want to do it. But it just, everybody that talked about it just, I don't know if they put off radiation. I don't know. I don't know what, to put up that 6-foot fence after taking down a bunch of beautiful trees. I don't see that either. I might be getting that wrong, but if you drive by that, if you go out there today and drive by exactly what we're looking at, you'll know what I'm talking about. The trees are right there. It's in a little bit of a corner. The corner's a little bit blind. Not that there's in the Dixon Lane's right there, so everybody that's out there knows to slow down and go around that. When you come around the corner now, and if you go out there and look today, if you come around that corner and you go past the straight Tingle Lane, which is right there. You pass Tingle Lane, the first thing you see is that big group of trees. If that's gone, you're going to see a cell phone tower. That's why I'm here today. I've got a son that's right beside me. Two friends right there. Their driveways are going to be looking right at Dixon Lane, which is going to be looking at that. When I opened my door this morning from where I live, looking straight ahead, I can see those trees. Now there's going to be a cell phone tower right above them, or if they're even there. I wasn't really planning to get up here and talking, but once you listen to that, and once you make that loop out there, it's a peaceful area out there, and it's always been that way. There's a lot of old farmers that aren't there anymore that I've talked with. I mean, it's just a place where everybody, you come down to knock on wood, you go in there, you see the people down there, the park. It's just a place, there's a lot of people that come to that park. It's a beautiful place, and it's beautiful if you go from there outside of Westport and make the total loop, you'll see what I'm talking about. You won't see another tower there. And if anybody tries to put one, I'm sure they'll probably be standing here too. I'm trying to be up here and not forget anything, but if you do have a chance, if you just take that ride today, it doesn't take much. You can see the little town of Westport. You see the park, see what y'all done to the park. It's been an improvement all the way around. And there's a lot of people that come out here and make that loop. Like I said, I don't want to make a neighbor mad, but when it comes to that, I don't know. It just, this is a Verizon phone. I pick up I can talk on this and do everything with this. Matter of fact, on the way, you don't want to see it, but I took off work today to come here. Boss is here. They're here because of that. When I was leaving and coming up the Little Rocks Road from Hidden Valley Road, had a bunch of turkey walking down the road, and I stopped, started taking video of them. Little ones coming out of the tree, and before it was over with, there was 10, 15 turkey that went right back to my place, just crossed, went into the woods. That's what I'm talking about. Just in the pond I have there, and the deer that show up, and the geese coming to the river. I mean, you're living on the fringe of society there. And what y'all have gone through today and all these buildings and the planning and everything was what everybody that's out there moved out there for, is to get that piece, to get it. It just, I don't know. I just felt like I had to come up here and if you did, and the other thing that when you talked about 524, and we've been forever trying to get that road paved again and even widened a little bit, even for the school buses on that hill. And there's a lot of people on that road. When you're coming down the hill, and all you got's that guardrail on the side of the hill to see if you can make that for those school buses. I think about that a lot. This is minor compared to, to fixing the road for the school buses and stuff.
Well,
But
This isn't a hearing about fixing the roads. And when I said about the widening, it's within a 60-foot right-of-way, they can make improvements. That was my only thing. And I don't
Yeah.
know of any improvements, and I understand there are places along 524 where
Right,
it's
yeah.
tricky. So I do understand that.
I'm just looking at it as from a school bus driver or big, there's not a lot of big trucks come out there, but the thing about it is school buses. Did I forget anything, or anybody want to know anything else? I mean, it's all
Anything else to
about-
add?
that-
All
that's all
right,
I've
do you
got.
have anything else?
No, I hope I don't think of anything before I sit down. But
Thank you
yeah.
for your comments, sir.
All right.
Who else would like to speak?
I'm Maureen James, and we live on Hidden Valley Road. We're a neighbor to Dave, and this eyesore will be what we see every single day when we leave. And
Hang on one second. You stated the road. Can you please give me the proper address?
8300 Hidden Valley Road.
Right, and you are, sir?
Stephen James.
Come closer to the mic,
Husband
please.
and wife.
Right.
We have 136 acres.
Understood. So while you guys
Can
are
we
giving
speak-
testimony here, hang on. While you guys are giving testimony here, what goes on the record is what you can get into the microphone. So
Okay.
speak to the
Very
microphone,
good.
okay?
I'd like to speak first.
Okay.
I have no idea why this would be proposed on a scenic byway, that everybody enjoys. It's advertised. There won't be another one that is not funded now, but it is a scenic byway. It's a beautiful stretch. It's a very tedious road, and that, I think, is why no one saw the sign. It had to be brought to my attention. I passed there many times without seeing the white sign, because when you drive that road, you're paying attention to the curve right where that cell tower is proposed. And you're really not looking for signage out there. But I haven't talked to anybody who is for this. It's an eyesore. This is the last rural area of Oldham County. And if you all haven't been out there, please take that 524 drive. It's it. When it's gone, it's gone. And it's your all's responsibility, in my opinion, to protect what is valuable to us. And, you're talking about 1 acre or a quarter acre. It's 200 feet.
It's a 20-story building.
Yes. In the middle of rural farmland. And I would like to now, I think I've said everything that I need to say. I'd like
Well,
to
you
thank
just
my
all
husband.
had your 200-year anniversary. Well, we're from Westport. That was the county seat. Oldham's Landing is not too far from me. I can see it. I have a cell phone tower I can look at in Indiana. It's across the river. I stare at that. I stare at the 2,000 square foot wave tower forever. And this was the last bit, and all they want, it only benefits Verizon and the property owner that is going to lease this to them. Everybody else, I have neighbors, have spent millions on their property. The Brazons, he was ambassador to England. Matthew and, but boy, they put in millions. I've known the Tingles, I've known the Brown, I've been living out here 45 years, I'm a native Louisville. I got away from Louisville for this. And I have 4 houses on it, I've repaired historic houses on my property and built and cleared, and now my value will go down because everybody will see that as our main part. So I don't know why you have to have it on 524. You have ridges everywhere. I have ridges. I have to pay a water drainage thing. I live on a ridge. The ridge has been draining for thousands and thousands of years, but I have to pay. So this is just one more. People move out where I am, want to be left alone. And we don't seem to be able to get a break. So this is about, we have optics out there. They have put all of that fiber optics. It's right on our road. So I don't know why they're saying this is going to be a big benefit to, I don't see it. Technology is, it's past, that. Just like that wave tower is obsolete. It should be torn down. If you really want to know, it has no use. But you rammed it through, and this is just another thing. Y'all should know, I remember when LaGrange wasn't much. And you were all proud of yourself the other day for your being 200 years old. Well, I remember when there was a stone jail, And so this is all like, you're learning what people moved out here for if you just allow this. There's so many other ridges. You got stop the gun range on Rebel Ridge. You could put it on Rebel Ridge. You could put it on Bohannon Ridge. There's ridges everywhere. This is right on 524. So I don't see it. Only benefits I see is for Verizon and the person that's gonna lease it. So, but it hurts me, it hurts all of my neighbors. So we put in our time and money, and to let things just go to hell, I just don't like it. Okay? You think about it. Take a drive around that road. It's the last one that's left that you can have a scene. Take the scenic byway signs off the thing. It won't be anymore. So that's all I have to say. Why don't you all drive out? Thank you.
All right, commissioners, questions? Time for questions. Those questions of applicant, those providing opposition testimony.
I have a question for the applicant.
Please. Oh, well, are we? I'm sorry, guys. Breach protocol. So yeah, and actually we are at rebuttal. Mr. Brown, your opportunity for rebuttal here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, appreciate it. I'll clarify one thing. If I was not clear, I apologize. Related to trees that are being removed, the only planned trees to be removed would be those that are provide for the drive or for the lease compound itself. So there is no plan to clear cut the 2-acre parcel upon which this is located. And the reason for the waiver request is to only remove those trees necessary for the construction of this location. As Mr. Urban said, this site does have right-of-way beyond where the edge of pavement is. Pretty substantial, it looks like. There's about 25 feet or so beyond existing right-of-way to where any construction improvements would occur. So if there was ever additional right-of-way needed to be taken, my belief is that unless there was a huge expansion, you probably wouldn't even get into the lease area that Horvath is proposing here. So I believe all of those improvements or repairs could be made in existing right-of-way or without interfering here. When I do these cases, a lot of times people ask, well, why can't it go over here or over there? And I'm not an RF engineer. I'm not, but I've done more than 100 of these hearings in 40 or 50 jurisdictions in 2 states, and I can tell you one thing I'm for certain is if we moved it over there, the folks who are here today wouldn't be here in opposition to the petition, but somebody else would probably be here in opposition to the petition. The reason that we're going at this location is that Verizon has identified that there is a lack of coverage and lack of capacity in this area of the county, and they have identified that there are, and they don't do that. This isn't proactive. This isn't fun for Verizon to spend $500,000 to build a tower just for fun. They're doing it as a result of usage patterns that they see customer complaints. I was in Laurel County last week, and I had one of the Plan Commission members after the hearing ask me how they could get a tower closer to their home. And my advice to them was call and complain, because that's how customer complaints are one of the largest things that drive development of new locations. Whether that's I can't make a call from inside my home, I have to step outside and make a call, or I have to go to the far corner, or I have dropped calls when I'm moving throughout the county or on specific roads. And that is what is attempting to be done here. It's a reactive business reacting to those needs. So if I've heard it one time, I've heard it almost every hearing, someone who lives close to the proposed location saying, well, I can make a call from my home currently. And that's a true statement, because these are a network. They're designed to be built onto each other. So you don't go out in the middle of the ocean and build an ocean of no coverage and build a new tower, because you're only then providing a coverage area for that specific nearby area. You're not building a network. So we do often build at the edge of existing coverage areas where capacity needs exist at that time. And so I have no doubt that neighbors can currently make a call from their home today. What I can tell you is folks who live a little further north, folks who live a little further east, probably cannot, because they are outside of the area where adequate coverage is being provided currently. And that's what's attempting to be addressed. So you can't pick up this tower and move it to 2 ridges away and provide the same coverage and capacity objectives. And that is, what Verizon's RF engineer has to provide to you. That's what's part of your uniform application as a requirement. And what Kentucky code provides is that we have evaluated other opportunities, and this is the one that meets the coverage and capacity objectives identified here. As it relates to value and enjoyment of properties, there are valuation studies. We don't have one for this location, but I can tell you that there are. If you look at the PSC record, there are many in the state of Kentucky that indicate that there is no impact to the value of buying and selling property based on proximity to wireless communication facilities. Those are longitudinal studies before and after, measuring them against folks that are more than 750 or 1,000 feet away. And that evidence, I don't have it here today for this tower, but I can tell you that it does exist, that I have it exists in a variety of communities, urban, rural. This is part of current society. To have that wireless coverage, to have that ability is important to home buyers and to property owners. Not to everyone. I'm not saying that it's to everyone's going to love it, and I would also attest that not everyone is going to hate it. But there will be people who this is an important part of why they consider a property and why they would look at, why they would want to build, buy, own, or not build, buy, or own. Might be based on that very issue. So I believe those are the specific issues that were brought up by those here in opposition. I'm happy to sit down and then answer questions at the appropriate time.
We'll come to the questions. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ma'am, we're going to go into questions from the commission. You will have an opportunity at rebuttal when that segment has concluded, okay? All right. Commissioners, sorry, it looks like we got away from our schedule just a little bit, but who has questions? Ms. Jones.
Okay, for the minimum lot area waiver, why would you, I mean, if you keep it at 1 acre, then it could be in the binding elements that that 1 acre of trees is not disturbed. So with the minimum lot size, you know, the landowner could do whatever they could remove all of those trees. What is the reasoning for not keeping the 1 acre and keeping the surrounding trees undisturbed to create the buffer?
Well, I will defer a little bit to your counsel on that, but I would advise, here's how I would answer that. You have a binding element that says no perimeter trees can be removed. So from my perspective, given that the lessor has to give consent for us to be here today to file, that binding element, from my perspective, is binding on the lessor. That perimeter tree binding commitment is whether or not it's inside or outside of the lease area.
And I apologize. So the lease then would need to contain a provision to that extent, I would think, and that the binding element would be that we would have to be provided at least a portion of the lease. I don't think I don't, and I can understand why you would not want it to be a matter of public record, kind of like a certificate of trust. I think we would need something like that to be filed that would indicate that the landlord is agreeing to that condition.
I don't have authority to agree to that standing here today. If you make it a condition, I can go back to my landlord and say, if you want the deal, this is what you have to accept. So I would take a slightly different view, which is if they're giving consent for me to come and file this application, the landlord's giving me consent to come do that. And there's a binding element placed that burdens more property than what the lease it contains. They are therefore, from my perspective, and this is how I advise the landlord if they were my client, they are bound by that commitment. They have the same obligation as the lessee does to be bound by that same commitment. If your counsel believes it's clearer for us to amend the lease to say that that's a condition of the lease, I would advocate strongly that the landlord agree to that, because that is contingent upon our ability to build this tower, is having that. So if that's a binding commitment and your counsel's requirement is that it be amended into the lease, we will pursue that with the understanding that if we can't get that, we can't build the tower.
Ms. Jones? Okay. All right. Ms. Davis, I'm sorry, I had you earlier. Thank you.
That's okay. I just have a question. I think you kind of answered it because you don't know. Typically, don't you look for the highest spot? We had someone come to us to want to put on our property, and they said we had the highest spot. And I was curious as to why you didn't look for a higher spot, because there's lots of high spots in Westport.
Yeah, so I did not directly answer that question, so I will now. So, I mean, we generally are looking for three things when site acquisition is looking for a site. So first of all, it's got to be within the search ring. So that's identified generally a half mile in diameter from a kind of a point in the county. This is roughly, as I mentioned, kind of 6/10 or so from what was dead, ground zero, the best spot. So it's close enough to meet those coverage objectives. So we're looking for something within that search ring. So other things that might be higher, maybe outside of the search ring, they might not be close enough to those existing towers that we're trying to connect and build that connection to. Or alternatively, if I built somewhere else, I might have to build a taller tower in order to kind of connect to those existing networks or have an overlapping coverage in those areas. So that may be why we didn't, for example, why we didn't go further north or why we didn't go closer to the river. Might be because I know that's because we would then be outside of that search ring and we wouldn't be able to provide overlapping coverage with the existing tower to the southeast. So that's one issue, is you're trying to locate within the search ring. You're also then trying to find someone who has space to lease, 10,000 square feet, give or take, of property. You need to have utilities nearby. You need to have ease of access to a right-of-way. So we're not, for example, we're not building a 1,000-foot access drive to get back to a tower. Generally, trying to build a shorter access. And then the third is you have to have a willing landlord. So as I mentioned, I can't come in and say, thou shalt lease to me or thou shalt sell me property. So I have to have somebody who would be interested in it and be willing to negotiate commercially reasonable terms. If you want $1 million a year for the site, you may have the best piece and it fits all the criteria, but $1 million a year isn't market. And so I can't move forward with that site.
Thank you. We declined it.
Hey, Ms. Davis, anything further? Okay, who else? Questions? Mr. Douglas, please.
Mr. Brown, going back to the minimum lot area waiver that you requested, and my understanding is your testimony that was given was the fact that you were requesting the waiver due to the fact that it would keep additional trees on the property for the landowner?
I think my testimony was that it allows the landowner to continue to utilize that property.
For what?
Recreational purposes, for whatever they would want to do, versus if I lease it, arguably, as a lessee, I have the right to exclude you from the property that you've leased to me for a long period of time.
And you mentioned in your testimony, and a matter of fact, I believe the county mentioned staff of similar or other areas where there may have been a waiver that was allowed, and I believe you elaborated on that there was. Were you part of that?
I did one in September of last year where there was a reduction in the lease area. To my recollection, that the lease area was allowed to be smaller. We asked for, in that same petition, asked for a waiver of the landscaping requirement, which was denied.
And do you recall why that was? The justification?
Because that property was largely agricultural, and so it allowed for the landowner to continue to utilize their property.
Because there were loss of income is what you, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but
I'm telling you that the lessor wanted to have the opportunity to continue to utilize their property.
Right. But you said due to agriculture.
I don't recall that.
Okay. But you started down that route. But you do admit that under KRS 100-987, it's the Planning Commission and legislative bodies that determine and make regulations about site areas, correct?
I didn't dispute that, no, sir. I agree that you have that authority.
Okay. And do you agree that under KRS 100.111, and I'm not an attorney, don't proceed, I'm asking you if it's correct, that the regulations that are in line and you're asking for that waiver for the lot area should be a burden on you to increase the justification why you're asking for that waiver. Because when you went and picked this area out, I'm sure you told your client or potential client what your requirements are for this county, correct?
I didn't negotiate the lease, so
So you can't testify
can't
what
testify
was
to what
negotiated.
was said or not. I can tell you that site acquisition personnel who go out and look at it don't always consult with attorneys before they go out and make those offers or designs, so I don't know what was said.
So we don't have all the facts.
I don't know what was said as part of the negotiations.
Okay. I don't have anything else.
All right, Mr. Douglas, nothing? All right, anyone else? Questions? Mr. Fox?
I have a question about the perimeter fencing and the landscaping. You made a comment, you have to take down trees to put up trees. You don't. Most of those trees out there are probably deciduous trees, so in the fall they lose all their foliage and they just become big stumps. Why can't you just plant evergreens around and in between them when you put up the wood fence, which I appreciate you came with a wood fence instead of chain link. There's some gorgeous evergreen trees that you can plant, and that way it'll stay green all year, and at least you won't see it quite as badly.
In order to comply with the ordinance, I would have to take down trees to put up trees, because we have ordinance requirements about how frequently they are planted, and so I couldn't commit that I can comply with your ordinance around existing trees.
Mr. Fox, anything additional?
Well, I'd like to ask if we can, may I continue?
Sure.
I don't understand, and perhaps Mr. Baxter could explain. It seems to me that, I own a farm. I like planting trees. I can go out in the middle of my woods and put an evergreen tree, a cedar tree, and it'll grow. So is there a way we could get around that? Because there's no reason you have to take down trees to put in evergreens. There ought to be some way around this. The folks are right. This is a scenic byway. Let's at least try to screen it if we can, help it out in the winters. Mr. Baxter, is there any way around that? Is there?
Well, Mr. Fox, I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer the question about the landscaping requirements. Normally, these issues come up, and Mr. Fisher is feverishly reading as we sit here, so I'm stalling. I'm doing the best I can to stall, but normally these are the questions that come up after the fact with the landscape requirements. You all just indicate that they have to comply with the landscape requirement, and they go in and meet with staff.
But let's do this. You got to put up an exhibit somewhere, because we're not looking at anything. So we're having a discussion about where things might go. At least put up on the overhead an exhibit. And what I suggest is anyone that shows the site plan, and the reality is that around the perimeter of the site, I'll call it internal, isn't necessary, but what the discussion has been regarding what you would see from the road. And I think that the reality is, show us where the trees are going to remain in relation to the road on this map. And if not, if they have to be disturbed in order to bring a road in or put a parking area, a little turnaround, whatever it is, that's where you want the landscaping. You don't want it soldiered around the fence. You want it where it's going to be, which is where you're going, most appropriate to block the view, other than the only thing you'll see is the road going in. But everything else, that's what you want to protect. So we've not seen any of that in relation to the landscape waiver, and that's what I asked earlier is, and we're finally going to get a picture and maybe an explanation. We don't see a copy of a potential landscape plan or tree preservation plan or any of this evidence at this point.
And before you start down that path, just if Mr. Fisher or Mr. Urban could give us some sense of how a landscape plan is reviewed and approved.
Well, how it's reviewed and approved, sure, is by staff. It's pretty simple.
Thank you. Right? So,
So I will tell you this. He's correct. So I do all the landscape plans. So person will submit the plans, make sure they're in compliance with the landscape standard. And then usually, and these are usually in regards to commercial occupancies, before they get their bond release, I go out and count trees and bushes and go, okay, they've got 15 here, just like the plan said. And then at that point, the bond is released. So that's how normally those landscape plans work. I will say, since I was reading feverishly and Mr. Baxter gave me time to find it, I do want to let you know what I found. And that is in those design standards, which they're asking for the waiver from, which is number 2, this is how it reads. The outside perimeter of the security fence surrounding the antenna tower shall be provided with a landscape buffer. The buffer is to be a minimum of 20 feet in width and contain a continuous evergreen screen that will achieve a minimum of 20 feet in height. So if their council wants to show that location and where existing trees are, you kind of know then what the landscape buffer requirement is. So if there's trees within that area that it's saying has to be evergreen shrub, I guess that's probably what he's referring to. Those trees would have to be removed to plant the evergreen shrubs. But
Which goes to what I was saying is looking for an alternative landscape plan that actually screens from the roadway or anybody that might see it, as opposed to soldiering it around the perimeter, which in some view might do nothing.
So what's on the screen now is the existing conditions. I admit it, I don't have a tree inventory. Admittedly, do not have a tree inventory here to put before you today. I can tell you, I was not prepared to have a tree inventory to walk through. But our position would be that, as you can see, this is a completely treed lot. All 2 acres of this are completely treed. So any construction activity is going to remove some trees. The desire here was to locate this in such a way so that on all sides, so here, I'm trying to talk, hold the microphone, and point at one time. Lawyers can only do one thing at a time. So the intent of this design was to retain trees along the right-of-way where that entrance comes in, because this shows right here, that's the edge of the right-of-way. So you would be able to retain trees between any construction limits and the right-of-way. You'd be able to retain trees on all 4 sides, but for the drive access immediately off of 524. So that was the intent of this design, was to retain trees on all 4 sides to accomplish what Mr. Urban just said, which is the only thing you should see is the cut into the drive access into it. If we were typically, the way that a landscape buffer would be installed, when we talk about the perimeter, we would generally be installed in that way. Within the lease area would generally be where a landscape buffer would be installed. I believe, if I recall correctly, for the previous one that we've referenced a couple times, we went back and actually had to get additional lease area because it was only a 75 by 75 lease area, and so we did not have area within the lease area to plant that existing landscaping. So that's typically how we would install it. And then on the gate side of the compound, we would not install landscaping because that would be where you would access it. You would most likely potentially have tree vehicular interference or backing through. So my point would be, if we are being required to go outside to have a larger lease area to install landscaping, which I believe we would need because of future expansion opportunities to have ground equipment for 2 additional co-locators. So this compound potentially could need to be expanded at a later date when a third carrier came in. You have space for 2 carriers within the existing compound. If you had to expand that compound, so move the fence out to the lease line, then we would not plant trees in the existing lease area where a future expansion might occur, because we would ultimately someday have to remove those. So my point about removing trees to add trees would be, our intention would be to have no construction activity outside of the lease area or the turnaround easement here. So there will be no construction activities outside of that. So if we're required to comply with your ordinance, which is to have a landscape buffer of 20 foot in width that grows to 20 feet in height, I don't see how I can do that by planting around existing deciduous trees without removing those existing deciduous trees. Because I can't accomplish strict compliance with your ordinance of having a continuous evergreen row on the perimeter if I don't remove existing deciduous trees.
So I understand what you're saying, and maybe I'm not making myself clear. So you're talking about potentially having to move trees if you increase the size of this lot. So you'd have to move this evergreen buffer that you'd have to build, but then you'd have to also remove those deciduous trees that you're saying are in your way from building a buffer today. I'm suggesting that you can just come in all around this area that you've X'd, and I don't know how Ryan gets around it or if we even can get around it, but you can just drop cedar trees in among those deciduous trees meaning this whole shot that you showed us is taken during the summer when everything is green and leafy. If you took a picture in the winter of that spot, I'm suggesting it currently would look a lot different, because I don't know, I haven't been out there. But you can drop cedar trees, or what they call green giants, in amongst all of those deciduous trees, and they'll grow just fine. You know, God will take care of it from there on. And if you do have to expand someday, and as you say, take down trees that you plant, well, you're also going to have to take down all those deciduous trees that you're telling us are in the way of your planting the buffer. So that's enough said, sir. I'm sorry.
No, as a matter of fact, you're not. If you will, please indulge me with a motion to take a quick break.
Yes, I made such a motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, voice vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. 5 minutes, guys. Okay, everyone, thank you for your patience. We will now return to order. Mr. Urban. Baxter.
Mr.
thank
Chairman,
you.
if I may interject, we had an opportunity to speak to council because there have been some questions raised that he's having a little trouble answering, and we wanted to give him an opportunity to get his information together. And we suggested that if he were to agree that we could table the matter, we would come back at the August meeting. This would be the first item on the agenda, and he could get some information about this landscape buffer and perhaps some other questions that have been raised today to answer a little more satisfactorily for members of the commission. The issue becomes there is that 60-day requirement that Mr. Fisher discussed in his presentation, and he would need to agree in writing, and I think he can put a representation on the record that he will provide that written agreement, but he needs to agree that they will waive that 60 days to get us to our next meeting. If he will do that, it would be my suggestion that a motion be made to table this matter to the August meeting.
Pending commitment to those requirements?
Yes, sir.
All right, folks, you've heard legal counsels.
Yeah, so
Mr. Brown?
I will commit to the commission that I will, as long as email's sufficient, I will put an email together yet today consenting to this going beyond the 60-day time period so that we can work to satisfactorily answer some of the questions raised today.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Baxter, anything additional?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Urban, anything additional? No. Okay. Chair will entertain a motion to table.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion, but first I would like just a point of correction or order. Will Mr. Brown be bringing experts in about even the installation, like Horvat Communications? Because he described what would be done to come in with, he hasn't explained anything about equipment, how much space they're going to need. He just indicated that during his testimony that they would stay within the 100 feet by 100 feet area. And I'm not sure if he's able to testify that they're able to do that.
And Mr. Chairman, I guess my comment would be it's Mr. Brown's right on behalf of his client to present his case in the manner he
Is your mic on?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
that
get closer,
he
please.
feels appropriate. So I appreciate your concern. You've expressed your concern. Mr. Brown, I'm sure, has heard your concern, and Mr. Brown is going to manage his case the way Mr. Brown wants to manage his case.
I'm satisfied.
All right, did you make a motion?
I make a motion that we table PZ dash, and on the application it says 2.3, but I'm wondering if that's 2.4. So dash 24 dash 013 with the acceptance of the applicant's attorney to postpone it to the August Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Mr. Baxter, do we have an adequate motion?
We do, Mr. Chairman.
All right, now is this protocol? Do we need a second and a vote, or is this immediate and we move along?
I think we need a
Second and a vote.
And a voice vote will be fine.
Fair enough. All right, do I have a second for the motion that's on the floor? Mr. Finney, thank you. Discussion?
I don't think there's discussion on this motion, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, I withdraw. All right, we will go with a voice vote. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, like sign. And motion carries. Mr. Brown, thank you. All right. What else do we have? Mr. Fisher?
Well, I don't really need to tell you all that we'll have a meeting next month now, but we will. So August 27th, for those that are on SRC, don't forget Thursday we'll be meeting. That is the 25th. And then just keep in mind that the SRC is normally the fourth Thursday of every month. So SRC for August will actually be the week before Planning Commission. So little different. So because I'm sure we're going to be meeting for SRC, and that seems like a good indication for me to sit down and be done.
All right, Mr. Urban, where are you going? Okay. I need you for this next piece of the discussion, please. So rumor has it, making our way to the exit, will this be your last meeting with the commission?
According to the Oldham era, yes.
Right? What about according to you?
Yes,
Yeah?
it is.
All right. If everyone would, please. Quick round of applause.
Well, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks,
Thank you for many years of service.
Yeah,
All right.
appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
All right. And Mr. Fisher, we'll look forward to our future with you. Thank you for being here. All right. Anything else, guys? All right. Go to the cause. We are adjourned.